what's up? We're here.
Yeah.
Pipe down, Barrett. I was trying to see if it was in the Heresy After Hours. We got to be live there, don't we?
No, we are.
We are there. There
Yes.
we go. You know, sometimes technology
I know
likes they like to lag, and you do the refresh, and you do the whole thing.
I know.
And Mark Zuckerberg is trying to zuck us. So we're here. We're live. We're on the YouTube, Choircast YouTube. We're in the Heresy After Hours. We're on Keith and my page. We're glad you're here.
Yeah, we've all been zucked.
We've been zucked. Mother Zucker. Hey, we didn't have a live stream last week. We were celebrating the resurrection of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ.
Yes.
I'm not making fun of that. I'm just playing. Like I don't know.
Yeah, I was speaking at the Unity Church. It was good. It was fun.
Good.
Yeah, had a good time.
Yeah.
So we're back.
I really do. I am not making fun of Jesus. I really do like Jesus. I really do.
I think Jesus is awesome. Yeah.
I think he's fucking cool. I think Paul's kind of cool too. I don't know.
I think Paul gets a bad rap. That's why we wrote Reading Romans Right.
He's probably a dick. If he came on the show, I'd be like, let's not have him back. That guy
exactly. Maybe we might be like, I don't know about that guy.
I don't know about that guy.
Not sure how
like that Seinfeld clip. This guy. This is not my kind of guy.
No. Yeah. But he's better than I think people think he is.
I think so.
Yeah. It's for me, I guess it's just the whole Lord and Savior thing with Jesus. Like, I don't feel like I have a Lord. I don't think I need a Lord.
Well, I mean, yeah.
Or a Savior, you know? Like, at least the way I used to think of those terms.
Right. Think of those terms my dog cannot read the room right now. She is bringing me her ball, and it's go time.
Let's go.
And because she knows I'm going to the farm later, and she's like, we're going now, motherfucker.
How does your dog know you're going to the farm later?
Okay, so border collies are really fucking smart. I just want to say hi before I get into it. Lisa, Judy, Katie, everyone else, what's up?
Yes, hello, good morning. Thank you all for
everyone who's not commenting, who is commenting. Hello from Sarah Fuckabee's Fuck Around and Find Out part of the world. Where's she from? Alabama?
Arkansas,
one of those.
Because Sarah Fuckabee, they had disasters, right? They had tornadoes.
Oh, and they found
Trump
out.
is refusing. Yep, he's like, oh no, let the states handle it.
Y'all want money?
Yeah, like, and one of the poorest states, you know,
come on,
are they're red states. Most of the poor states are red states, and so you're screwed.
I just found out California became the 4th largest economy in the world.
In the world, not in the United States.
So this is what if I was the governor, I'd be like this right now. Come at me, bro.
Yes. Yes. What does that mean? Does that mean that like 96% of all the other nations' economies make less money than California? That's crazy.
Go fuck yourselves, the rest of you.
Yeah. Hey, John.
John's here. What's up, John? Hey, yeah. So just so you know, border collies are the smartest fucking dog. So I put my boots on. Here she comes again. She knows I'm talking shit. She knows I'm talking shit about her.
If you're watching the video live, you can see the dog.
She just comes out with that tongue, that big ass tongue.
Yeah.
Fuck down. Hey, all right. I'm gonna do it once, but then I'm gonna tell her to fuck off. Go on. She knows, like she can smell the certain clothes that I wear up there, like the work clothes.
The clothes you put on when you go.
You ever seen those videos? They are fucking cool. I'm not even a dog person, but you go onto like TikTok, you go to whatever YouTube, and you see like border collies herding sheep in like Ireland, Scotland. It's fucking impressive. They'll just like jump over fences. They just do command, go, and they'll run like a mile around a hill and drive them. Like they're fucking incredible dogs.
Yeah.
And
so
then
friend of ours had a border collie, and those dogs that are naturally herders. That's what's so crazy. Like they just do it naturally. When our boys were little, a friend was walking her dog, and we stopped to talk to her. Well, she wasn't a friend; she was a neighbor. We stopped to talk to her. All 4 of us were standing in the front yard, and that dog started herding our kids. Like they started to separate and go different directions, and that dog immediately ran around.
I don't know if you ever seen them. They'll do this, like the crawl, and my dog's always like this with me, like low crawling, like a fucking Navy SEAL. I'm like, Jesus Christ. Yeah, so I like all these clothes. It's raining out. It's muddy. I'm gonna go to the farm right after this. I've got my clothes on. She can smell it, and she's like, ever since I put these clothes on, She's amped. She's ready. She's like, "Are we going?
Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Come on."
I'm like, I don't know,
You're
maybe.
driving that dog crazy, man.
I am.
Take your boots off. That's just all you got to do.
Boots on. I put them by the door, and she knows. Lisa says my working dogs love me to put my boots on. Yes, they fucking lose their shit. They have massive energy, keeps you busy. I just told her she's pretty smart, but then she comes right back for more. My Cavalier is a trained foot warmer under my desk. I don't know what that is. That's my other dog. I have a terrier and a border collie.
Apparently, it's a dog that likes to sit on your feet while you're at the desk. Keep your feet warm. That's good.
Yeah,
that's helpful.
My dog, my terrier slept on my bed last night, which he always does. But my wife's out of town at a competition, and my terrier won't come near me when they're gone. He's like beside himself that they're gone. But last night he was like super needy. It was really funny.
Yeah.
And I've got a cold. I'm sick. I'm not feeling it. I'm like, I just get the fuck away from me, you beasts. John says, let's see. I bet Pope Francis visited Scrooge in his sleep during the cardinal sermon while he was passed out at the service. I saw Trump.
I don't know, because I think he would have awakened with more fear and a change of heart, because that's what happens in the Scrooge story. There was none of that.
We published that story, Christmas Classics, didn't we?
Yes, we did. It's in the Christmas Classics edition of the Choir Classics includes that story.
I just got into an argument on Facebook with one of my friends. Apparently thinks I have Trump derangement syndrome because I was like, look at this. All I pointed out, I don't give a fuck if he's wearing a blue suit. I don't give a fuck.
No, I don't care.
My whole point was like, y'all flipped the fuck out when Obama wore a tan suit on a random ass Tuesday.
Yes. Yeah. It wasn't like a major event hosting some.
He just had a tan suit on a Tuesday afternoon.
I want to wear the tan one today. Yeah, no.
And you guys lost your shit.
And you don't care that he wore a blue suit. The only person when they were specifically asked in the invitation to wear black. Now,
some other people wear a dark blue suit.
Yeah,
but he did stand out like a fucking buffoon.
Of course, because he wants to. That's the point.
He wants the attention. He's a narcissist, and you guys, whatever. We all know it. It just rehashed the same shit. Whatever. Just rinse, repeat. We have a video today, right? We're gonna comment on some.
We have some content.
I have a cover reveal. This
okay,
will be.
Do that?
I have a cover reveal. Yeah, I got it queued up.
Okay.
In case we didn't have any other reasons to get arrested in this fascistic regime, we're like, hey, why don't we write this book? Why don't we put this book out? Which, if you're listening on the podcast, you can't see, but if you're here live, you could see that this is the cover we have for The Unchristian Truth About White Christian Nationalism.
Yes.
Forward by Lisa Sharon Harper, edited by Keith Giles. I feel like I should put my name on there, but whatever. I don't give a fuck. I edited a little bit, but whatever.
So
whatever.
You did do the cover. So, but you're on the inside cover.
I don't need my name on the front.
We actually have been working on this one for a while. So Lisa Sharon Harper wrote an amazing foreword. The contributors to this book are December Rose, Brandon Robertson, Seth Showalter, Aidan Bohanda-Moore, Daniel Henderson, Herb Montgomery, Jamie Arpin Reese, Dylan Neighbor Cruz, and Mackie Ashman Steenwick. So it's really good. Really great essays in there. Looking forward to this one. So we decided we're putting this one out in June, right?
Yeah, June.
Yeah.
Before we get shut down as a business.
That's right. So we moved it up. Actually, it was going to be in July. We moved it up. So give ourselves a little more time before they shut us down. Yeah. So this will be a good one. Looking forward to this one.
Yeah. So I just want to reveal that.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah. It'll be great. Lisa says, looks like an amazing book. Amazing and timely book. Love Lisa Sharon Harper. Yeah, so do we.
Yeah. She's always been great on the show and very gracious to write this forward for us.
Mm-hmm.
So
we're just
what
poking
else?
the bear. We're just like, hey,
we are.
Fuck it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, all those contributors are I think only two of them are like straight white men. The rest of them are women and people of color, or people that are queer and trans and things like that. So it's the majority of contributors are people talking about the very real dangers and harm caused by Project 2025 and white Christian nationalism. So, yeah, it's definitely a good one.
We're doing our part.
Yeah, very cool. So for this episode, what we wanted to do, and I have to make sure I explain this because it can get complicated. So Sean McDowell, who we've mentioned on this show several times, he's an evangelical.
Friend of the show.
Not really. I'd love for him to be on the show at some point. So I don't want to be too mean to the guy because he's a nice guy overall. He's one of the only, maybe the only evangelical Christian YouTuber apologist, evangelical apologist who has had people on his show who are progressive Christians who disagree with him. Alyssa Childers doesn't do that. Mike Winger doesn't do that. No one else does that. So props to him for doing that. But on his show recently, so he had recorded like a 1 minute, TikTok video trying to say that the Bible doesn't have any contradictions. Then Dan McClellan, who we love, who would also love to have on the show sometime. Dan McClellan
would love to be a friend to the show. I would love that.
If he was a friend of the show. He recorded a video reacting to Sean's video, basically debunking the idea, Sean's claim that the Bible had no contradictions. And then Sean McDowell recorded a reaction video to Dan's reaction video to Sean's video to react to Dan's claims that Sean's claims in the previous video were bogus. So we are now going to react to Sean's video, reacting to Dan McClellan's video, reacting to Sean's video that the Bible has no contradictions. You got it?
What? No, I don't. But no, I do. But this is like an hour-long video. I tried to queue it up in the spot where we can start, and we'll just see what happens, right?
Yeah. So yeah, hopefully that explains what we're listening to, what we're going to be watching here, and how we're going to respond. And honestly, Matt and I have not scrubbed through this.
I haven't even watched it.
Yeah, we haven't even watched the whole thing. I just thought it was hilarious that first of all, that Sean would dare record a 1 minute TikTok video. That 1 minute, in 1 minute, you can disprove the notion that the Bible has any errors or, contradictions.
I mean, I would love to see Sean just debate Dan McClellan straight up.
Yes, have Dan on your show.
Dan McClellan will roast his
he would. That's why he won't do it.
He won't. Sean won't.
No, he won't do that. No. I really don't think he would.
It's the same reason Charlie Kirk goes and talks to college kids and shit. He's not going to debate fucking Pac-Man.
He can make them look stupid. Yes, he can make them look stupid. That's what it is. Stupid. Yeah, and I'm sorry. I love you, Sean, for at least where you are in your process. But I think Dan McClellan is a much better scholar. And I know he is. I mean,
I got no ill feelings for. I couldn't pick Sean out of a fucking crowd unless I was really paying attention, and that's no disrespect. He couldn't pick me out of a crowd, even if he was.
Yeah, he doesn't know us either. Yeah,
I don't give a fuck about that. But I would yeah. I mean, Sean does better than the bar, which is set at the ground zero, which is
right.
Elisa doesn't bring on anyone.
No.
All these people don't bring on anyone. Okay, so Sean, you brought on some people sometimes to talk about some shit.
Yeah.
But really, okay. Let's get into I mean, I don't know anything about this video. We'll see where it goes.
We'll just play a clip and we'll stop it
we'll stop it wherever you tell me to stop it. Or
okay. Or if you feel like
I'll stop it, I'm like, I gotta stop it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So here we go.
Yeah, let's see what is this. Let's make that maximized here. No, I gotta unshare. I gotta remove that.
Yeah, and add this other thing.
Gotta bring this other thing on.
Okay,
now it's good, right? So this must be a TikTok because it's
yeah, it is
up and down. So we'll see what he says.
Of the Bible. This wouldn't prove that Christianity is false.
So while I'm sure that is the rhetorical goal of many challenges to the dogma of univocality, that's certainly not the reason that I am challenging that dogma. But I will point out that if you imagine that every challenge to the dogma of univocality is an attempt to disprove Christianity, and you are an apologist for Christianity, that obviously means you're going to be beginning from a position of dogma, and you're going to have a much harder time actually thinking critically about the data you're engaging. And I think your use of the subjunctive mood in if there were actually contradictions in the Bible is indicative of that dogmatic stance from which you're engaging the question.
Rather than respond.
Okay, that was good.
You want to hear it? Like, okay, so far, I hate. How should I put it? Sometimes it's like you approach a conversation and you can't even pay attention to what they're talking about because there's too many presuppositions, right? Like, so once we jump off with like the people who are trying to disprove the inerrancy of the Bible are trying to disprove Christianity. Once we start there, it's like, I'm out.
Right.
I'm out.
Yes, because Dan McClellan, he's a Christian. I mean, he's a Mormon.
Isn't he Mormon?
He's a Mormon, but he's a Bible scholar.
He's a scholar.
And his whole point, but the thing is that he would call himself a Christian, so he's not like I'm trying to disprove Christianity.
I don't say Mormon as a pejorative. I just say it as a sect. Like that's where he comes from. I don't know if he's there currently, but that's where he comes from.
That's what he said. The last I saw a very recent interview with him, and he still says yes, he is a Mormon. So he
Matthew
would say
Corman's still an Adventist, from what I understand.
Right. That's right. Yes, as far as I know, he is. Yes, still a Seventh-day Adventist. So and Dan makes a really good point. Like to say the phrase "if there were contradictions in the Bible," again, he's pointing out that Sean has a presupposition about any criticism of the Bible. To say it like even if there were is like you're not really open-minded to engage this conversation. To say it like that, if there were,
it's almost phrased like when I think about it, like if you say I went to a Bible college, or if you say I went to a university, and if you went to the Bible college, you studied whatever the Bible, some aspect
Old
of the Bible,
Testament, New Testament, something. Yeah.
If you went to university, you might have studied religious studies, right? So
much broader.
It's the phrasing of the question would be a lot different if you were an historian or a philosopher of ancient whatever Hellenistic like what you specialize in. That the phrasing of the question would be a lot different than if you're like, well, assuming there might be contradictions in the Bible, what would we say? It's like, okay, well that's approaching it like you went to Bible college, bro.
Yeah.
And whatever.
Well, also, but to your point, we should let people know if you don't know.
If you don't know, now you know.
Sean McDowell is a professor at Biola University, the Bible Institute of Los Angeles. It is a Christian school where everyone, because my youngest son attended there and graduated from there, you have to take a Bible minor no matter what your major is.
But I don't necessarily discredit his education. Because he went to Biola's accredited, right? It's a good
school.
I'm not saying it's that for that reason. I'm just saying when you jump off like that, it's a bit of a red flag for me because you're coming across not like an historian or a philosopher or an historian of theological thought or development or whatever. You're coming across as an apologist, and you got an agenda right off the jump.
Yeah,
where I don't feel that when I watch Dan. I don't watch Dan and say, oh, this is a Mormon trying to make me a Mormon.
Right.
Exactly. Like, I've never watched Dan and be like, this guy's trying to make me a Mormon to save my soul or whatever.
Right. Okay, so let's get into more, because now Dan's going to react. Dan's going to react.
Okay.
Oh, no, Sean's going to react to what Dan just said. This is Sean reacting to Dan.
Let's see if we can get there here, if the producer would get his act together.
Responding to the substance of my claim. He criticizes me for approaching the text with dogma. This is actually a classic ad hominem in which a response is directed at a person, in this case, my supposed dogmatic stance that undermines my ability to think critically, rather than addressing the argument. My point went unaddressed. The point, though, is simply that the mere presence of contradictions would not mean that Jesus didn't rise from the grave, or that we couldn't investigate that Jesus has potentially risen from the grave.
I actually agree with him.
I agree with him. Sure. Okay.
I'm tracking with you. Right.
So far, Sean, you get a point.
Yeah, even if there were contradictions, it does not discredit the claims that some Christians make, right? Like,
yeah, but all
namely
Dan is
that Jesus.
saying, yeah, all Dan is saying is that sounds like what you would say if you were coming from the side of dogma and not from the side of an open mind.
Sure. Okay.
You know?
Yeah,
But whatever.
but so far, yeah, I'm just okay. Yeah, we'll keep going.
Yeah, go ahead,
A
Sean.
contradiction might challenge inerrancy,
Yeah.
but not necessarily reliability of the text, depending on the nature of the contradictions and how many, in fact, there are.
Sure.
Now, just as a side note, Jonathan, before you give me your thoughts, do I think every challenge is an attempt to disprove Christianity? Of course not.
Great.
Anyone who follows me knows that I probe deeply to what I call the question behind the question and try to address as best I can the question that people are really asking. He imagines what he thinks I think because he seems to have certain
Can I just say that's also a hermeneutic, Sean?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
assumptions about apologists. What's your take?
No, absolutely. I completely agree with you. I'm not myself an inerrantist. I think that the Gospels and the Book of Acts are incredibly reliable sources. There's a small handful of cases where I'm persuaded that the best explanation of a particular discrepancy is a minor good faith mistake. I don't believe that the evangelists ever deliberately distorted the facts or asserted something contrary to what they knew to be the case. And I think that as we inspect the Gospels and Acts and we evaluate them as historical sources, what we find is that they are evidently composed by individuals who are very well informed, very close up to the facts, and in the habit of being scrupulous. Not all hypothesized errors are of equal epistemic significance, right? There's a distinction to be made between a minor good faith mistake, of which I think there are a handful, and deliberate distortions of fact. The latter would be of much more grave consequence as far as our ability to trust these sources.
Yeah. So say something,
well,
and then
yeah,
I'll say something.
Okay. What I want to say is, okay, the assumption that if Matthew says it happened this way and Luke says it happened a different way, that we should be able to say, well, it's good faith. They're not trying to mislead anybody. They just, they're telling you the truth as far as they know. That doesn't change the fact that which one is right. We have no way of knowing.
Also, there's a third way, and this is why Buddhism is so important. And I'm not a Buddhist apologist because I'm not a Buddhist. But this is where I would apply Buddhism to Christianity and Christian theology and say there's a middle way. Distort the facts, that's one way.
Yeah.
In the middle, though, is like, okay, so you're not trying to distort the facts, but you do have a theological bent.
You do have an agenda.
Like, you're not thinking I'm lying, I'm distorting the facts. I'm in good faith, I'm not distorting the facts. So this is a false binary they've painted so far.
Yeah.
The middle way says, I'm not distorting the facts. I'm in good faith, but I do have a theology.
Yeah.
And so there's a lens, there's a grid, there's a filter through which I'm writing my gospel.
Yes.
And so they've painted the false binary, and I'm coming in saying, hey, they could have good faith. They could be reporting the facts, but they could also have their presuppositions, which we all have, which is Matthew's theology might be different than John's theology, and both are painting the facts and both have good faith, and it still ends up with a contradiction. Why?
Yeah, it does. So it's really odd too, because this guy who's with Sean on this, he was the guy who was just talking that we're responding to. It's also, he says, "Oh, I'm not an inerrantist," but then the way he nuances that is still basically to say that when the Bible is wrong, when we do see contradictions, they're not really contradictions, right? He still kind of says, well, that's not a contradiction because, Matthew really thought that was true, or Luke really thought this was true. So see there, they don't agree. So there's errors, but at the end of the day, it's all true somehow because it's true, quote unquote, because it's reliable and trustworthy because they honestly believed it was true.
That's the leap of faith I don't have. I would say
bullshit.
I agree with that,
Yeah.
but I don't take it to I agree that I would like to give whoever wrote Matthew, whoever wrote Luke, Acts, whoever wrote John, Mark, that none of them are trying to deceive me. Like, I give them the benefit of the doubt. Like, I don't think you're trying to deceive me. I think you're writing through your lens. Yeah, I just don't like this kind of like, well, if it's in good faith and they have their perspective, like, there's not like another option. Like, you could have good faith in your perspective and be a little bit wrong or be a little misguided or write it in such, like, we're all writers here.
Yeah.
I've read shit into my own writing that I'm not aware of. Right?
Right.
Like, right. Like, I'm not aware of all my blind spots, and those blind spots impact how I write.
Yeah. Yeah.
So ipso facto, the same for the Bible writers. Like, there's shit I guarantee every Bible writer wrote that was influenced by something they were blind to.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I hope that they, again, we haven't pre-watched all this, so I'm hoping to get into some specifics, because keeping it general is not helpful. Like, I hope they will look at some specific contradictions between, like, Matthew and Luke. And then I want to see how Sean or this other guy tries to harmonize them.
Why don't we see what happens?
Let's see what happens.
Relative to minor good faith mistakes in otherwise demonstrably reliable and trustworthy sources.
So reliable.
That's really helpful. And one of the reasons I brought you on is because you're not an inerrantist. And part of the critique tends to be that, well, somebody who resists the argument being put forth by Dan is only trying to gin up this position of inerrancy. And you're actually saying, no, you and I differ on this, and we can have that debate or discussion separately, but you still don't buy the arguments and pushback that he makes.
Do that.
That's the reason I want to have you on. Well, let's go to the second clip.
But I don't want to have that debate. I don't want to have that actual debate.
This is why I love hip hop. Like, all right, give me the diss track then.
Yes. We should have that debate someday. Guess what? They'll never have that debate.
They won't.
You want to prove Christianity is false, you got to reproduce the body of Jesus.
So I don't know how one would be able to prove that a body were Jesus's body. And that standard seems to me to already be presupposing an awful lot of things about the narrative of Jesus's life and death in the Gospels. And also that certainly would not be the only way to disprove Christianity. But again, not the point of my engagement with this question.
What is that? I mean, what does it even mean, though, to disprove Christianity? What does that mean? It's not a critique on Dan. It's just, that phrase is weird. Disprove it of what?
Yeah. Well, I mean, but he makes a good point. Like, Sean is saying to disprove Christianity, you'd have to produce the body of Jesus. And Dan's point is like, how would I prove? So let's say I have a body. How could I ever prove to anyone that this is the body of Jesus of Nazareth? There's no possible way. You know why?
Bro.
Because none of us can. None of us have ever seen it. We don't have his dental records. We don't have his high school yearbook photo, his fingerprints. Like, how could you do that? That's ridiculous.
It doesn't matter. The story's phenomenal. I don't gotta put forth the body of Frodo and said he went to what the story is
proves Lord of the Rings. Yes,
it doesn't that's weird. That's just Frodo. That's a weird posture. Like, disprove Christianity of what?
Because I think Sean is hinging everything on the resurrection, right? Sean is saying that the most provable thing in the Bible
has to be literal. It has to be a body. There's got to be a blood.
Body. That's right, literal, and that's his
heart, everything.
Right.
Like,
so now we're backing it up to another issue. The actual thing would be like, because lots of Christians disagree about the resurrection.
That's a theology too.
Marcus Borg and John Dominic Crossan both have had exceptional debates, and you can find them on YouTube, where they, as Christians, argue that yes, Jesus resurrected, but not in a physical body. So they are Christians who believe in the resurrection without believing in a physical body. If you showed a physical body to Marcus Borg, if he was still alive, or John Dominic Crossan, or people like that, and said, aha, here's the body of Jesus, they would say, I still believe in Jesus and I'm still a Christian.
Here, what do you mean here's the body of Jesus?
It would disprove it would disprove Sean McDowell's version of Christianity.
That's weird.
Right, but not Christianity in total. It would just disprove a certain, narrow view of the definition of Christianity.
I don't know. I'm struggling so far. Let's go.
Okay.
I actually agree with part of what Dan says here, in the sense that reproducing the body of Jesus would not be the only way to disprove Christianity. I think that's a fair point that he's raising. Okay, now, could we even in principle find the body of Jesus? That's a separate question, but it is interesting that some ancient, well-known contemporaries of Jesus, we found at least potentially the ossuary.
I'm sorry. That's like the least interesting shit I've ever heard. Look, I'm not looking for the body of Jesus of Nazareth.
Yeah. Caiaphas, James, a brother of Jesus. So in principle, we could have that investigation. But the larger point that's intended here, that I've stated many times, not on a TikTok video, is that Christianity rises or falls on the historical resurrection of Jesus, not an inerrant Bible, or even historical sources that lack contradictions. The chief sign that Jesus gave of his identity is the resurrection, the sign of Jonah. Now, historically speaking, and my research on the fate of the apostles, which you helped me quite a bit with, is in history. So I had to read a ton of how history operates and how historians approach their task. And it's often rooted in abduction. That is an inference to the best explanation. So if someone can give a better explanation for the historical data surrounding the life, death, and appearance claims of Jesus, then Christianity loses credibility, and one ought arguably not embrace it. That's the simple point that I'm making, but I appreciate his pushback for clarity on it. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I don't think that finding the body of Jesus would be the only way to falsify Christianity. In fact, most complex systems are not disproven by a single anomalous piece of data, but rather by many different pieces of data which point univocally against the proposition in question. I think Christianity being a complex topic, there are, of course, points of evidence that bear positively on Christianity as well as negatively. And in my judgment, the preponderance of evidence overwhelmingly confirms the truth of Christianity. That, of course, does not deny that there is evidence on the other side of the balance as well. I think the problem of evil, for example, is some evidence against the proposition of God. I just think the evidence in favor of that is far stronger. The resurrection, by the way, is only one of several major lines of argument for the truth of Christianity. The others would be other credibly attested New Testament miracles, the conversion of Paul on the road to Damascus, recounted in Acts 9, 22 and 26, and
who became a universalist.
More briefly in Paul's own letters. You've also got the argument from the Christological trilemma, most popularly associated with C.S. Lewis, although other scholars prior to Lewis has also come up with the same idea. J.K. Chesterton, for example, in his book The Everlasting Men. There's also the argument for Messianic prophecy. There's also the argument for modern miracles. So all that to say, the resurrection is only one of several major lines of argument for the truth of Christianity.
Let's look at
what. What is the truth of Christianity, though? That, like, they haven't even said that yet. Okay, so the resurrection. What does it mean, though? Like, so if we get to the meaning of something, what does it matter that Jesus died and rose from the grave? What does it matter to me?
They would say it proves that Jesus was God.
Okay, so what is
so what? Right?
How does it affect me right now?
It proves that you had better become a Christian or you're going to burn in hell forever, Matt.
That's an atonement theory and that's an eschatology. That doesn't say anything of that shit.
That is, I know that.
Even if they get to the end of this, even if they get to the end of this, though, all they say is a guy was born as a Jewish guy.
Yeah.
He died.
Yeah.
He was dead for a weekend.
Yeah, a weekend.
He rose from the grave. So the fuck what? What did he teach? Feed the poor.
Yeah.
House the immigrant. Like,
love your enemy.
Where are we going with this yet? Where are we at? We're at 10 minutes in. So what?
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I would love to get Sean on the show, because these are great questions I'd love to put to Sean.
We haven't even gotten to the practicality of this shit because it doesn't even. So what?
But they're not arguing. Yeah, they're not arguing for
practicality.
practicality. What does it mean? It's just the dogma. Again, Dan is right. It's the dogma. So they're arguing for the dogma, even though they're saying it's not about dogma. At the end of the day, that's what they're defending, is the dogma.
Okay, so far, let's say I agree with everything they've said. So what does it mean to me? Okay, so some guy 2,000 years died and rose from the dead. Christianity is true. What does that mean? That God hates gay people, or I'm going to go to hell? Where the fuck did you get that from?
Yeah, well, they believe me, they have a way of constructing this thing in apologetics.
Okay, all right.
All right, so he's about to play another clip from Dan, I think.
Good. That's fantastic.
Let's get some sanity here.
Clip number 3.
We can show Jesus rose from the grave, even if there were contradictions in the Bible.
No, you can't. That's a dogma. That is not something that is supported by any data. That is a claim that directly contravenes everything we've ever been able to observe about the nature of life in the universe. So that's not saying I begin from the position that it's impossible. It's saying I begin from the position that that is an extraordinary claim that requires extraordinary evidence.
Yeah.
And you have absolutely nothing even remotely approximating extraordinary evidence for this event that would overturn everything that we have consistently been able to observe about the nature of life in the universe.
Again, he misses the point that I'm making here. Now, that might be on me, Jonathan. Maybe I needed to be more
I agree with this. That is on. I don't know what the fuck the point is yet either.
But it's
I'm
10
minutes in. I don't know what the point is yet. I feel you on that one. I guarantee I feel you. I agree.
Clear in a 60-second TikTok video. But the larger point that I've consistently made is I'm claiming that we can, in principle, show that Jesus has risen from the grave by examining the historical evidence if we are unencumbered by naturalistic dogma. When we investigate the miracle claims of Jesus, the empty
maybe it's not
naturalistic dogma, which is scientific, observable, experiential data that people that died don't come back to life 3 days later. That's dogma. That's dogma. Or is that fucking reality?
See what he's saying. Like I reject pure naturalism philosophy as well, but like, bro, you're making such a leap of fucking like you're trying to get me to believe you jumped over the Grand Canyon and be like, I leapt that shit. I'm like, well, I see how you got to the end of it, but
dogma away, Matt, you would be able to see.
I understand how you got to the end of the jump, but I don't know how you got from the jump to the end of the land.
The reports of his appearances, the conversion of Paul, like you said, the resurrection of Jesus, I would argue, and again, haven't demonstrated that here, but I would argue is the best explanation of the facts. Contradictions would not undermine the possibility of such an investigation.
Totally. Like, this is where I have a problem. Okay, so far, if I put my Christian hat on, I'm like, yes, everything you said is true, which is why I'm a universalist.
Yeah.
Which is why I believe Paul wrote a universalist text. Like, he believed so heartily in the resurrection of Christ that it converted him from a prosecutorial Judaizer to a follower of the nonviolent, non-retributive, all-merciful, broad, high, wide God that is embodied in Jesus, proven by the resurrection, which is why he's a universalist.
That's why he's a universalist, John. Why can't you see that? Yes, you want Paul. Paul is the linchpin. The conversion of Paul, the persecutor of the church. Something happened. Some encounter changed him overnight into this person who is now the apostle of the faith, who is the biggest offender of the faith. And so yes, okay, wow, that's great evidence. Let's look deeply at this Paul guy and what did it change him into? A universalist. Yes. Reading Romans right. Available now on Amazon.
No, let's go back to Reformed theology. Like, what do you if I take your argument so far where I think they're going, is like, okay, so why are you not a universalist, Sean?
Yes.
Like then we,
That,
yeah.
I'd love to have him on the show and ask him that. How do you not
December
see this?
says, there's no historical evidence that Jesus rose from the grave. To believe it is purely an act of faith, nothing more, nothing less. And there's nothing wrong with that.
And there's nothing wrong with that. You can have
Nothing
faith.
wrong with that.
That's
When
why
you
it's
jump
called
into
faith.
like we gotta prove it historically, now
Yeah.
you're outside of like what faith is. Like
This is this obsession with certainty. We have to have certainty, right? And no,
Right.
that now you don't have faith. That's the opposite of faith. You have certainty.
this
But you don't have certainty, really.
We got an hour, and this podcast can be like 6 hours long.
Well, we don't have to do the whole video. I think this,
Now, I want you to weigh in on this, but there's two things that he said that I want to unpack a little bit. One, he said extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
Sure.
yes,
Second, he said, quote, that is a claim that directly contravenes everything we have been able to observe about the nature of life in the universe. Now,
General.
my point is that both of these are presuppositions that he begins with and doesn't defend. Now, there's a difference between having a
It could actually be phenomenological, like those things that are born die.
yes.
They don't come back to life. Like it
And
could be
I should-
presuppositional, but it could also be phenomenological, Sean.
Yeah, exactly. Go ahead.
supposition in a 1-minute TikTok video and then doing a response video and presupposing something as if it's true and not defending it. Now, I do want to read from a fascinating book by Dale Allison, who is a critical scholar. I would argue one of the leading New Testament scholars in the world. I've had him on this channel to interact with Mike Lacona. He's a charming, thoughtful guy, and he's very critical. 3 years ago, and by the way, he's a professor at New Testament Studies at Princeton Theological Seminary. 3 years ago, he wrote a book called Encountering Mystery, where he talks about angelic appearances, near-death experiences, and other like supernatural phenomenon, and talks about how maybe we should have more of an openness to these kinds of things.
We do.
So he says at the beginning, he says, numinous experiences may not be common, but they are not, even in our so-called secular world, uncommon. Now, that's really interesting. That raises the question when Dan says it contravenes everything we have been able to observe. Well, who exactly is included in that we? Now, a couple of things I just want to read. And then
Okay. I mean,
angels appearing to you, near-death
when
experiences. That doesn't therefore prove that it's true that Jesus physically rose from the dead 3 days later.
of course not. And
What a
just
leap.
because Dan says everything, it's like, Keith, I waited for you forever. Why
That's
were
right.
you not on time? Like,
Yes.
okay. Now again, you're applying that like very literalistic hermeneutic just because Dan said everything. Everything, like, did Dan literally mean every little jot and tittle of everything for all time? I don't know if he meant that. Come on.
No.
All I feel like he's saying is like, well, yeah, everything we study is like, for the most
everything
part,
we
like,
observe, everything that we take for
you will be
granted that-
born, you will die.
you will. Yes,
You will
these are
die.
facts. Gravity is real. Yes.
Come on, Sean. Be better. Do better.
Yeah. Do better. Come on.
he actually responds to the point that Dan makes from Carl Sagan. He says, this is Allison again, skepticism about religious beliefs and experiences is for many people an integral part of what it means to be educated. For those so minded, all religious experience, like every other alleged miracle, can be in principle explained without appeal to extra mundane realities. On their view, up-to-date analysis inevitably reveals that the out of the ordinary is always the ordinary in disguise. He says this book is not for them. Rather, it addresses those who are, because of their worldview, open-minded about its topics, or at least half open-minded. And he kind of says, if you just had one case of the supernatural, that wouldn't be enough. But there are case after case after case after case. Now, he responds to this specific point about extraordinary claims requiring extraordinary evidence. Here's what Allison writes. He says, Carl Sagan, echoing others before him, famously said extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. But the word extraordinary is not a fixed measure. It is rather relative to one's other beliefs. What is extraordinary for one may not be so for another, or at least much less so. Our sense of what can or cannot happen inevitably reflects what has or has not happened to us personally. This is in part explains why I hold some beliefs that Carl Sagan did not. My experience moves me to ponder possibilities he likely never explored. They preclude me from identifying our flatland with all there is. There must be more extra dimensions, other realities, additional intelligences. Now, that's coming from a critical scholar who says this. I would argue, and you and I are not making this case here, that the evidence for the supernatural and modern miracles is quite compelling and it's widespread. And it has been argued with academic rigor and should not be dismissed with a hand wave, but should be taken seriously. I am admittedly not making that case here again, but simply pointing out that he has assumptions guiding his critique just as much as I do. So he can't settle the issue by setting up his own standard without defending it, and then come to the conclusion rooted in his own assumptions as if he doesn't have any assumptions. Your take.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And the point that you just made is also articulated by Craig Keener. He wrote, as you know, a 2-volume set called Miracles, the Credibility of the New Testament Accounts. He also has a more condensed volume called Miracles.
Which Craig Keener we quote in Reading Romans Right, who would argue against the, the type of complementarianism that is so prevalent in the Christian church.
Yeah, and so this is kind of silly to me. So if I understand what the point they're trying to argue is that the physical and bodily resurrection of Jesus was a miracle, because there are examples of other, not specifically the same kind, but other types of miraculous things, or at least unexplained things that you could call miraculous throughout history. Therefore, the physical bodily resurrection of Jesus is true. That's like going back to our thing we were saying a minute ago. Like, if I claim that I ran and jumped across the Grand Canyon, and you said that would be a miracle, and I would say, well, there's evidence of miracles all over. So therefore, because there's evidence of miracles in the world, that proves that I did jump over the Grand Canyon.
That's affirming the consequent in philosophy. So the example that I've always used, and I've talked to Rick Machuga, Mike's dad, who was a philosophy professor, is to say, like, if it rains, my patio will be wet. My patio is wet, therefore it rained. Yeah. And you say, well, okay, but a sprinkler could have been left on. Someone could have dropped a bucket of water, so a garden hose could have been on. It could have just whatever.
Yeah.
There are other reasons to explain why the patio would be wet. And so it's not to say it didn't rain. It could have rained, but your logic, getting people to believe that something could be true, but your logic is still off, is difficult for people. And that's one thing. Yeah, there could be a 92% chance it rained. But there's that little chance that someone spilled a bucket, someone dropped some tea, whatever the reason are, this patio is wet and it didn't rain.
Right.
And so logic would just tell you that something could be true, but also logically fallacious. Like it's a fallacy in logic, even though it ends up being what happened.
So I would love to, again, if Sean would come on the show and make that similar point that he's making just now, I would like to then ask him, like, okay, so then therefore that means that you believe in miracles from other faiths too, right? So you believe when Muslims say that Muhammad was riding a horse and that horse jumped off of a rock and went into the sky, that is true because it's a miracle. And
or maybe there's a bunch of monkeys that built a bridge in Buddhism, like,
yes,
right? Isn't there
that's a miracle? So therefore it must be true.
Right.
Yeah. So you affirm all miracles from all faiths, not just your faith.
Well, right? He wouldn't say that. I
know he wouldn't say that. He only wants to use these examples to prove miracles in his faith, and therefore those miracles prove his faith is true. But he would not allow a Buddhist or a Muslim or a Hindu to make the same argument that their faith is therefore true.
This is the problem with apologetics, is that you could take everything Sean has been saying and back up the claims said in other faiths.
That's right.
And they say, oh, the difference is the resurrection. Well, no, but not the difference in logic.
Right.
Like, Muslims believe in Jesus.
Yeah, they do.
They talk about Jesus a lot more than they talk about Muhammad, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Correct me if I'm
Jesus
wrong.
appears
I mean,
more than Muhammad. Yeah, exactly.
So with his apologetics, I could back up any faith, and I'm cool with that as a pluralist, as a whatever the fuck I am. I don't even know. I don't know what the label is. But Sean's an apologist for Christianity and a very specific type of Christianity. Yes. But if you use his apologetics to argue for a different faith, you logically could.
Yeah, you really could.
You could.
We could seriously take these. We could take clips of this video and use them to have Sean arguing to prove that Muhammad flew into the sky on a horse.
You could.
You could.
And so I think that's the reason, again, with like, this is like, it's my faith. Like, it's the faith that you currently have that is the correct faith.
Yes.
And that means that it's correct, again, binarily opposed to all the other ones. The other ones are wrong because yours is right. And if yours is right, the other ones can't be wrong. And since yours is right, those are wrong. And again, we become presuppositionalists again. Right?
Yeah, it's why Dan McClellan accurately said in his response video that what he detects in Sean is his dogma, that he has a dogma that he is defending, and he would never apply the same quote unquote logic and arguments that he's applying to his dogma to other dogmas.
Well, that would be a dangerous precedent because you become a Muslim.
That's
and I don't say that as a pejorative.
No, exactly.
I'm saying it rhetorically.
Yes, exactly.
I have Muslim friends. I don't give a fuck if you're whatever. I'm not.
Yeah,
any
exactly.
Of it.
Yeah, I have lots of Muslim friends
today, and he points out correctly that
I have the most Muslim friends.
I have so many.
Certain sense of circularity in David Hume's objection to justified belief in miracles, because a large part of his objection to justified belief in miracles is that miracles go against uniform human testimony. But if human testimony is not uniform, then that undercuts that basis for that objection. And so in order to make the case that miracles go against uniform human testimony, Hume has to dismiss all the testimonies to miracles on that same basis. And so there's a circularity there. David Hume's objection to miracles was actually refuted quite adequately by Hume's own contemporaries, such as George Campbell, John Douglas, William Paley, and also by modern philosophers. John Earman, for example, is an agnostic philosopher who published a book in the early 2000s called Hume's Abject.
I'm sorry, but I feel you're hearing the audio, right? Even if the video is not popping up.
Yes, I heard.
I'm struggling because I feel like they're debating a devout atheist, and Dan McClellan is not that.
Not an atheist. That's what they're acting like. They're still assuming that he's trying to disprove Christianity.
Dan McClellan is way more religious than I am, I think.
Yes, I would think so. I think as a Mormon, he's definitely more Christian than you and I.
Yeah, I'm struggling with this. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, guys.
Failure. And just to give one a short critique of David Hume. This point was made in William Paley's view of the evidences of Christianity in his preparatory considerations.
I don't know. Where do you want me to go to?
It's I don't know. Can you just go to one of the next clip?
The next clip.
Yeah. Well, before that, does he play a clip of Sean's? There we go. Yeah. Go play that clip. There you go.
We're right there.
Yeah.
And willing to follow the evidence wherever it leads. If it leads in a natural or in a supernatural.
Okay, but if Sean leads the evidence where it leads and it leads him outside of Christianity, he's going to burn in hell forever, motherfucker.
But he would never do that. His dogma would find a way to twist back.
See, that's the thing, though, because there's eschatological fucking punishment for you if you ever conclude anything other than the thing that gets you to heaven, bitch.
Of course,
I'm not calling him a bitch. Collapse. Yeah, his world will collapse.
Yeah.
I'd say the same shit to myself. Like, hey, bitch, like you don't go there.
That's direction. Let's look at the next clip.
But second, keep in mind there's a difference between a contradiction and a difference. For example, the Gospel Mark at the empty tomb reports one young man. Later Gospels will say there's two angels. That's not a contradiction, because if there's two, there's one.
So the idea that
I hate that. That's just stupid. You're silly.
I've heard that shit my whole life. Well, but you know, if there's two, there's one. Then say that there's
and if
two.
there's 10,000, there's 50. Like, fuck.
It's so stupid.
Yo, if I said, hey, I only cheated on with you once, but I did it 10,000 times. Well, I did it once too.
That's once. If there was 10,000 times, there was once. So
maybe don't get mad.
If there were two, there were one argument adequately resolves the ostensible contradiction in the Gospel's accounts of the resurrection, I think is symptomatic of one of the critical methodological flaws of apologetics. Yeah. Because the main rhetorical goal of apologetics is not to convince people who don't already agree. It's not to convince me. It's not to generate an argument that is valid for critical scholars. The main purpose of apologetics is to perform confidence and competence so that the people who already agree can be made to feel validated in that agreement. Yeah. And because their worldviews and their self-identities are so entangled with the dogmas they want to be convinced are true, the evidentiary bar is lying on the ground. And so they do not require remarkably robust or sophisticated or methodologically valid arguments. They just need to be made to feel that the arguments are valid. And because they generally are not incredibly well informed about critical scholarship, you just have to simulate a valid argument. You don't actually have to produce one. So apologetics is primarily aimed at performing an argument that's good enough to convince non-specialists who really, really, really want to be convinced that the dogma is justified. That's the main purpose of apologetics.
Again,
that was fucking beautiful. Thank you, Dan. He's right. That was so good. They're not trying to convince skeptics, right? Because an honest skeptic would hear that and just like we did, just laugh. Well, if there's one, there's two. If there's two, there's one. Oh, really, dude? That's your answer? Come on. And so, like, because again, yeah, the purpose of apologetics is to convince people that are already Christians when they see something that scares, that shakes their faith. Say, oh, no, it's okay. No, I know that I know that looks like it doesn't, because we know we're trying to tell you that there's no errors and it's inerrant, it's infallible. But what about these? Oh, no. See, it's still, look, we'll find a way to show you. And like Dan said, it just has to be good enough to make that fear go away and say, oh, there's an answer of some kind. These scholars, they're smarter than me. They assure me that even though that really, like, to an untrained person like me, that really looks like a contradiction, but no, somehow it isn't. Okay, good. I can go back to being a Christian again. And not
again, it all seems futile. Who gives a fuck if there's a contradiction?
Yeah. Well, was people that believe that it's an error,
was there one? It doesn't fuck. Well, yeah. Instead of saying, "Oh, well, was the crucifixion on Thursday or Friday?" Well, it depends on who you ask, because it depends on how the theological presuppositions of the writer impact the theology of it. So John really tell it a lot differently because he got a whole different theological paradigm than a different writer.
Yeah, and that's a great one too. The thing about the resurrection, right, is that, and that's why there's so many different. I've heard Christian apologists take both positions. One, that he was crucified on Thursday, because that's the only way to make it 3 days and 3 nights. And others saying, no, it was on Friday, but with the Jewish calendar, the way they treat morning and night is, the sundown counts the day, and it still doesn't make sense.
I'm out of practice.
Yeah.
But to me, that the Thursday, Friday has something to do with not the amount of days, but has to do with the Passover and when the lamb slaughtered would be slaughtered.
That's right.
And so if you're trying to make this theological move that
to make it overlap,
you gotta do some twisting and some jive in here. Like, you gotta make it work. You gotta make the round peg fit in the square hole or whatever the fuck the thing is.
Yeah.
And yeah,
but like Dan said, that all you have to do is provide enough of an answer to assuage the fears of Christians who have a doubt. We got to prevent deconstruction here. We got to stop people from deconstructing their theology, and therefore apologetics is the dam we're going to build to hold it in, to keep it strong. Don't doubt, don't ask questions, don't fear. Somehow, woo, magic. It all does make sense.
I really
even though
don't
it very
like
obviously doesn't.
I don't like apologetics.
I was into it in college. I was totally
December disagrees with me, says no, she has the most Muslim friend. She's married to a Muslim, so I'm gonna have to concede that point to December. My apologies.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah. We're already over an hour. Do you want to keep going? We can go a little.
Let's go a little bit. I go a little bit more.
Let's see what they say.
I just have to point out that he doesn't address my point.
What's your point?
But uses the clip as a launching ground to criticize apologetics. Now, because I'm an apologist and I teach in a Masters of Apologetics program, I'm going to take a minute to offer a different perspective.
I'm sorry. I'm not here to disrespect the man. But every college experience that I've had would not have been apologetics. You don't take a Masters of Apologetics.
Masters of Apologetics.
What does that even fucking mean, dude? Like, no, I'm here to chat. Like, when I was in critical thinking, I took on the role of the opposite thing that I believed in. Yeah. Like, we're not here to be an apologist for everything. I challenged my critical thinking professor. I got an A in the class, and I challenged him all the fucking time. I don't know how it is now with the woke, whatever, but like a Masters of Apologetics, that to me seems weird. That's a red flag right off the bat. Like,
so because this is a long video and we're not going to have a chance.
Agenda, Masters of Propaganda.
It's Masters of Propaganda. That's really what it should be called. Christian propaganda. So I just looked it up because we're not going to get into the specifics, I don't think, of the contradictions, but like I think the biggest contradictions between the synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, are between Luke and Matthew. Mark, not so much, because it's more like Luke and Matthew add more details to Mark than that they're contradicting Mark. But Luke and Matthew absolutely contradict. Like, they don't agree. Like, I think I'm looking for the one that's to me the biggest one. There's one where
propaganda. He's a mop. I'm gonna call this. I'm gonna call Sean a mop.
Yeah. So I think Matthew has the disciples meeting Jesus in Galilee, and Luke has them meeting Jesus in Jerusalem. And to me, that's the biggest one. In Matthew, Jesus tells the disciples before he appears to them that they should remain in Galilee, or they should return to Galilee. And in Luke, he tells them to remain in Jerusalem where he's been crucified. That is a huge contradiction. What happened? Did Jesus tell them to go back to Galilee and he would see them there? Or did he tell them to stay in Jerusalem and not to go to Galilee and he would meet them in Jerusalem? And so that to me is one of the big ones. That's not the only one. But there's all kinds of things that Matthew mentions. Like the lineage is different. Matthew traces the lineage to Abraham. Luke traces it to Adam.
Matthew's lineage is that's making a point, obviously.
Yeah, they're trying to make a point. But again, like you were saying, of course they're trying to make a point. That's what we're saying. It's not that they're contradicting. It's that they have different theological agendas that they're trying to prove something.
Yeah, it's weird language to say there's contradictions, because it's only contradictions when you are arguing an inerrantist.
Yes.
Like, are there contradictions between Peter Jackson's films and the Lord of the Rings books and Tolkien's books?
Yeah.
If I accept both as canon, it seems like the wrong question.
Right.
It seems like someone taking creative liberty to make an updated, different media that respects the story, but also makes it its own media. Like,
yeah,
to say, is there a contradiction, is again to go like, I'm an inerrantist, and if the only canon is literally what Tolkien wrote, it's like, okay, throw out the Silmarillion because his son finished that.
Right.
And no one would say that. So it's like, it becomes tiring when you're like, I don't know. I mean, is it on this day or is it that day? Is the genealogy this or that? And it's like, I don't even got to go to that.
Yeah.
Jesus's theology is diametrically opposed to Deuteronomy 28. So
Yeah,
I'm a big
absolutely.
guy. I'm not an historian. I'm not a biblical scholar.
Right.
I lean toward philosophy, which is where I get some
Yeah.
of my education. I lean toward big ideas, and I say, well, the friends of Job had a Deuteronomic theology,
Yeah.
and Jesus corrected that by who sinned, his parents or him? Jesus
Right.
is like, what are
Neither.
you talking about? Like
Yeah.
that assumption comes from Job, comes from Deuteronomy 28.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those are the contradictions I'm interested in, the theological
Oh,
ones,
yeah.
because those are the ones where it's like you cannot argue your way out of that.
Big time. No, and then you and I have gotten in trouble for that, for pointing those kind of things out. Like, yeah, there's a massive contradictions. Jesus is radically reforming Judaism. He is flat out contradicting Moses. You have heard it said, quotes Moses, but I say to you, says something different.
Both Jesus and Paul would fail the Masters of Apologetics course. Their hermeneutics suck. They're not good. They're too creative. They're too out of context. They quote their scriptures so far out of bounds than what Sean and all them people would do. People would do that they would flunk out of their introduction to hermeneutics course.
Big time. Yeah,
Big
Jesus
time.
and Paul would fail. They would fail Sean's class.
They would. That's where I'm at. I'm like, I don't give a fuck when he was killed on Thursday, Friday. How many people were at the cross? How many thieves? Whatever. How many angels how many people at the tomb? How many does?
Yeah.
I don't. Wait, we blew past the theology that is diametrically contradictory, and we just blew past that, and we're focused on the jot and tittle, which is weird.
Yes, it is.
That's weird. That's funny.
Yeah.
You're like, you can't convince me that Jesus was like employing a Deuteronomy 28 hermeneutic.
But they would want
you
to.
will never convince me that because
I would say
it's not possible. You might as well tell me the earth is flat.
Yeah. To me, you're right. See, to me, it's on that level. It's like, how do you not see this? My gosh. It's so ridiculous to hold on to this.
God will bless the people who do the righteous things with rain for their crops. He will dry up those that sin. Who sinned, him or his parents? Right. No one.
Yes.
You don't
Jesus says God brings rain on the just and the unjust, the righteous and the unrighteous. That direct contradiction of Deuteronomy. Yep.
Why in Mark are the disciples so boneheaded, out of bounds? They don't understand it because their theology presupposes the shit that would get them an A in Sean's class.
That's right. Thank you. That's exactly right. Come on, Sean. Come on the show. Come on the show, Sean. We want to ask you these questions. We would love to talk to you about this.
I'll be nice.
Yes.
If I call you a motherfucker, I call myself a motherfucker.
It's a term of endearment.
It's a term of endearment, unless you're this motherfucker.
Yeah.
Like December has said, are you that motherfucker or this motherfucker?
Or this. Yeah.
Sean is trying to be this motherfucker by like.
Yeah.
That's those are the type of people who like to play both games. Like I'm not an inerrantist, so I'm
I'm so open-minded.
I'm free of the critique. I'm almost progressive. Like
yes, but then everything you do is basically trying to argue for an inerrant view. Yeah.
Yeah. And we could go on. This has been an hour and 10, but we could go on. We only made it 21 minutes into this. Do you want to do one more clip and then we'll bounce?
Let's do one more clip. So scrub forward to like another of Sean's.
I got it. Well, he talks for a while now. You want me to go now until this next Dan clip, or you want to hear a Dan clip?
Let's hear a Dan clip.
All right.
Because Dan makes more sense.
So this is just simply not true.
Good stuff, Jonathan. Let's look at the next clip.
So here we have this, if there are two, there are one notion. And try that in a court of law, where you have differing testimonies about how many people were robbing a bank or something like that. That's a context where you're expected to provide all of the relevant data and not omit relevant data. And with the Gospels, we kind of expect the same, don't we? I mean, at least the author of the Gospel of Luke says, I'm going to give you all the relevant details. And so for one to say, oh, there was one young man there sitting, and for another to say, well, there were two angels standing, like that's not really reconcilable unless you retreat to the notion that a contradiction cannot be a contradiction unless and until you can and have conclusively demonstrated, prove beyond any reasonable doubt, that there is no logically or physically possible way for the two propositions to be true at the same time. That's a conceptualization of contradiction that is not standard, but is necessary for the performance of these arguments.
Eyewitnesses are evaluated in a typical trial before they go to trial. And then they can be re-interviewed when there's differences to see if they can be reconciled or how they're reconciled. But in a cold case, which would be more comparable to the gospel accounts, we don't have access to the witnesses. Does that mean we throw out testimonies with differences of the kind?
Dan never said throw out. He's still a religious man, right?
Right. He's not throwing them out. He's admitting that they are contradictory, and yet he's holding them both in tension.
Yeah.
And again, like Matt and I are saying, we admit there are tons of contradictions, and that doesn't mean we reject them. It means we're just admitting that there are contradictions.
Yeah.
And you can do both.
I would not speak for you or Dan, but I would suggest that neither you, Dan, nor myself are naturalistic, atheistic philosopher types.
No, I'm not a naturalist. I'm
not
not a materialist. No,
I'm not a materialist
I
either.
believe in spiritual reality.
Totally. Yeah.
So
yeah. This is wild.
I even believe in miracles.
That we see in the Gospels. The answer is no. Cold case detectives know that such differences would be easily resolved if they could talk with witnesses. And yet they're still able to utilize such testimony at times in a trial. The Gospels have the kind of differences that are expected of common testimony. Such differences, by the way, do not mean that a crime did not occur. Now, one of my favorite books on the historical Jesus is called The Jesus Legend by Paul Rhodes Eddy and Gregory Boyd. And there's just an example in here that I think is really important to read in the section in their book. This is on page 424. And they said this. They said there's the case of the 1881 lynching of two young men, Frank and Jack McDonald, known as the McDonald Boys in Michigan. One account claimed that the boys were hung from a railroad crossing, while the other claimed they were strung up on a pine tree. Aren't those contradictory accounts? The accounts seem hopelessly contradictory until Allen and Montel discovered old photographs that shows the bodies hanging at different times from both places. As macabre as it is, the McDonald boys apparently had first been hung by a railroad crossing, then taken down, dragged to a pine tree, and hoisted up again. Sometimes reality is stranger and more gruesome than fiction.
Yeah, but that's different. It's so different.
So different.
That's so different because we know that the writers of the Gospels had theological and philosophical agendas when they wrote it. Like even if you're an inerrantist, you're like, Matthew's Gospel is really Jewish and John's Gospel is like metaphysical and Greek.
Yes.
Like
and kind of anti-Jewish in some ways too.
In some ways, like so. Yes, again, like I don't know even what the point of Sean's. I don't even know what the point is yet, except that to prove quote unquote that Jesus rose from the dead.
Yeah. So, but to Sean's point about testimony in a cold case, right? So a court of law. So we bring up one witness, and the witness tells us that there was one person. Just using it as an example, there was one boy sitting at the tomb. And the next one comes up and says there were two angels and they were standing. Okay. Now we know they both can't be true because they're wrong about how many and what and their position. Whether one sitting or there were two standing. And so you would continue to do the investigation, and at some point you would hopefully decide one of them is wrong, and therefore we're going to throw out that testimony, right? I don't believe the guy that says there was one person sitting There's more evidence that there were two people standing. So that's the testimony we're going to go with to convict this person of the crime or whatever, right? You would never in a court of law somehow say, no, there was one person sitting and there were two people standing and they're both right. And you have to listen to both of them and they both are telling the truth. No, you would have to find some way of throwing one out or accepting the other one or finding a middle ground somewhere, but like they can't both be right.
I agree with that, and I think the whole thing's a waste of fucking time because we're talking like we're not. This isn't a forensic case.
No,
This is a story that we've now been distracted by the apologetics and the inerrancy of it again.
Yes,
like we're back to we've missed the entire point of the. Did Frodo really live in Middle Earth?
Yes.
It's to me the most boring book of all time, right?
Yeah.
No one's gonna read it, and no one should read it.
Yeah.
But I hope people read the wisdom of hobbits because I take something from the story and I try to make ourselves better people for it.
Right.
So does the story of Jesus and his resurrection give us a better story than you live, you die, and there's no justice for the poor ever? Or that's materialism.
Right.
Sorry, atheists.
Yeah, sorry.
Most of the poor die with no justice. Go fuck yourself. It's over.
Yeah,
that sucks.
Yeah.
And so, like,
is there a meaning that we can pull out of the story? Right.
Right. And if we hyperfixate on how many people are there, I'm now bored, to quote Rob Bell. This is the most boring. Did Jonah really get swallowed by a whale? I'm now bored.
Yes.
You're boring.
You are missing the point.
You're missing
completely
the point.
Missing the point of that story. Yes.
Yeah. I hope my book, The Wisdom of Hobbits, is much more interesting, whether you like it or not, than did Frodo really live in the Shire?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, it's an interesting. This was just a fascinating video. That's why I thought it would be worth talking about it. Again,
we might have to bring it back.
Yeah,
we got to get 45 minutes left of this shit.
Yeah, well, maybe next week we can do. Oh well, no, we won't be here in 2 weeks, right? Next week,
2 weeks.
So in 2 weeks, maybe in 2 weeks we can revisit it. Remember where we're at here. What's our timestamp?
29:08.
Okay,
we're about halfway.
Okay.
All right. So in 2 weeks we're gonna do this. We're gonna
come back. We're gonna finish this thing.
Yeah. So you got to make sure, if you're not subscribed to the Heretic Happy Hour podcast, subscribe. Follow us on Facebook. Join the Heresy After Hours. Subscribe to YouTube, Choircast, and make sure you get those notifications so that in 2 weeks, when we pick up where we left off at the basically like the 30-minute mark,
halfway point,
we're gonna keep going because it's too interesting of a conversation.
Yeah, I do really hope at some point they get into some specifics, because I think that's better. Right now, it's sort of like, what is truth? What do you mean when you say blah blah blah? It's like that's so stupid.
Well, I think it's important too.
It is. No, it is.
I think it's important because you say, "Oh, it disproves Christianity." What is it? What is Christianity? Disproves it how? Like all those kind of things were very nebulous sort of phrases. Were like, "Oh, it proves Christianity right." Which of the 40,000 denominations? Which of the eschatology? Which of the soteriologies? What are we even talking about? I don't want to sound like Jordan Peterson, but you know.
Right. No, that's exactly what I thought.
What is is.
Yeah. What is is.
What is. Who is we? Says John. Who is we? Yeah, that's a good question. All right, we'll see you. Well, I'll try to be back this next coming Sunday.
Right.
Of course, we're here Thursday and Friday for every main and bonus show. We'll see you all on the flip side. We'll see you soon. Love y'all. Thanks for listening.
New episode dropping on Tuesday. Check it out.
Yeah. If you're subscribed, you'll get that notification. Let's go.
That's right.
Adios, y'all.